would be incredible. All right, so I've got it up. Let me see if we are. I know it's
Because I got
the other.
LinkedIn on their screen here too.
Yeah.
Okay, it says
Let's
click to
see.
join live.
Okay,
All right. You
we
see
are
a
live.
picture of us. We're not moving. We're kind of frozen.
I got us. You got us?
Not live, but a frozen picture of us. Me in a weird position.
Oh, I've got us live. I'm looking right at us right now.
Okay. So you can see
All right.
questions if they come.
I sure can.
All right. Well,
Let
then I'll
me.
just turn mine off so I'm not distracted.
All right. And I just turned the volume off on it so that we can watch this thing go. And I will keep an eye on questions if they come.
Right?
All right. Well, we are. What is it? The EOS principle: start on time, end on time, all those different things exactly at 11:30, and we are kicking this thing off. I can already tell Mark that this is going to be an incredible conversation. Even if I haven't met you a couple weeks ago. I'm really excited to dive into the conversation today, and a big part of that I think is going to be on this notion of positive intelligence, and I knew nothing about this idea, this concept of positive intelligence. I do want to set the stage first for who you are. And one thing of this is I've never had a Vistage chair on. So I was a part of Vistage for about 6 years. I put it on hiatus when I deployed for the Navy. And when I got back, I was in the middle of a sale process, so I didn't stand it back up. But I'm intimately familiar with Vistage. So I'm excited about this conversation to have my first Vistage chair on as a guest. One of the things that I saw as I was looking through your profile and your background was you had founder in your title quite a few times. And one of them was a founder before you ever went into the corporate world. And so I'm dying to start there in this journey of like, you got into it was Taylor Fire Protection Company, and then there's quite a few other founders, and there's quite a few other corporations, and then there's just this big Vistage thing in there. So let's take it from the top. How did you get started in entrepreneurship?
I, I come from Detroit, and you could say I come from a poor family. I didn't know we were poor while we were being raised. I only knew it afterwards. But when I hear people talk about things like they went to the movies or they went to a restaurant or the number of toys they got for a holiday, that wasn't part of my upbringing. So my parents couldn't afford to send me to college, and I was doing it the old-fashioned way, flipping hamburgers at McDonald's. Yes, I really did work at McDonald's
Love it.
for $1.65 an hour. Um, I saw an ad in the paper for a job that paid $5 per presentation, giving fire safety presentations. And I thought, well, this would be a lot better, and I'd be able to wear a suit and tie, and I wouldn't smell so bad. I applied for the job. After several negotiations, I got the job with the agreement that I would cut my long hair. This was in 1973. Um, and I did very well. I became one of the top 10 fire protectors in the world. And basically, we went door to door selling Vulcan fire protection systems. And we would tell people about the dangers of a fire and how there's 1,400 different ways that a fire could start in your home. And you only had 4 minutes to get out of that fire alive. And what's going to wake you up? The Vulcan fire protection system. So after my success, one day my boss came up to me and said, how would you like to own your own business? I thought, wow, own my own business, be my own boss. I mean, that's awesome. So I dropped out of college and I moved across the state and I opened up a distributorship selling Vulcan fire alarms and named my company the Taylor Fire Protection Company. I hired salespeople, I trained salespeople, had an office, furniture, ad in the yellow pages. 6 months later, I had no sales, no revenue. Things were so different in Holland, Michigan than they were in Detroit area. And I didn't really know why. I went on a sales call and I saw the salesperson do the presentation just like I did. And at the end of the presentation, the husband said, "We don't need your Vulcan fire protection. God will protect us from fire." And I learned later that Holland has more churches per person than any other city in the United States. I asked my mentor, what do I do with an objection like that? And he gave me some ideas. I went on the next call. And when the husband, sure enough, said the same thing, I got on my knees and I said, maybe, just maybe, God sent me today to tell you about the Vulcan fire protection system.
I got it. What happened? What happened in that? Nope.
Didn't work. So on October the 21st, 1976, I closed down the office with tears running down my face, sold off the furniture, laid off all the employees, completely broke, a failure. Now, talk about positive intelligence. I didn't know it then, but we have this thing that we call the judge, which is the part of ourselves that constantly criticizes us. And I was beating myself up big time in a deep, deep, deep funk.
And so at this point, you went from McDonald's. It sounds like you were also in college at the time. This opportunity came up, and you sort of found your calling. Like as you were going door to door, and you were able to sell these systems, you were like, this is what I'm here to do. You were so good at it that they were like, here's a company, go do this in a different region. And then it failed. So what do you do at that point? So you were halfway through college, so there's no degree, there's no company. What happens?
I had a kid by this time and a wife to support, so I needed a job. I needed health insurance, so I got a job in corporate America, a Fortune 500 company. I thought that the reason why I failed was because I didn't have a college degree. In Detroit, everyone goes to work for Chrysler, Ford, General Motors. They call themselves factory rats. And I didn't want to go work in the factory. And very few people, less than 5% of the people I went to high school with went to college. So I thought college is it. That's the silver bullet. And then I dropped out of college. So the company I worked for had an educational reimbursement program. I worked full time and I went to school 2 nights a week for the next 3 years. And I finally got my college degree. But I didn't feel any smarter. And I didn't really feel like I knew why I failed in business. So since then, I've overeducated myself. I've got an MBA, I got a master's in leadership, and I've taken just about any personal development program that you can think of.
That's really interesting, because like one of the things that I hear you saying is that you felt like a part of the failure was not having the degree. You go and you get that degree, and then nothing. And then like nothing changed. You didn't feel like smart or any of these other things. And then in the same breath, you said you just kept going and just kept getting more and more degrees.
Yes.
Why was that? Like what was there a shift in thinking in what like institutional education or just constant education, professional development meant to you? Like why continue to pursue if it didn't make you feel any different?
I felt like there was something missing in me, that I wasn't enough in some capacity. And if I could only learn more, if I could only learn the secret. These were the days of Tommy Hopkins and Zig Ziglar. I did the Dale Carnegie course, and just about every course that I did promised to give you the secret to success in life. I did the Landmark Forum, I did the 6 Day, doing all of these courses looking for that secret. So, as I went through my 20s, I was in that search. I got really tired at corporate America. I was miserable. I was smoking 3 packs of cigarettes a day. I was drinking every day. I was 50 pounds heavier than I am now. And my wife finally said, "You got to quit. This is, you're going to kill yourself working here. Why don't you go back into business for yourself?" And I was afraid to go back into business for myself. We had 3 kids by this time. We both had cars. We were, doing fairly well, doing much better than the neighborhood that I grew up in. And to give all that up and go back in the business and risk being a failure again was really a challenge for me. But she said, we're young, I'll support you. And with her support, I made the break, and I started my company in August of 1989, the Taylor Systems Engineering Corporation. And I worked hard at it. I mean, I was the micromanager on steroids. I didn't think of myself as CEO. It was a company that was a software company, like if you think of Travelocity, only for shipping packages. So if you wanted to ship this mug from New York to California, it would tell you who would get it there the fastest and at what price, and it would integrate with your ERP system or your accounting system, and tell you the tracking numbers and send out the invoices. It was really AI before AI was a thing. I mean, we think of it as a thing, but we built rules into it and followed these rules, and it was really cool. It was doing pretty well. But I was checking every line of code that the engineers wrote. I checked every invoice that the bookkeeper sent out. I went on every sales call. I checked every proposal because I wasn't going to let this thing fail. I was so afraid of failure. I mean, these are the saboteurs that you see as the theme, that I'm not enough, that I'm an imposter, that I'm going to fail, that I got to do all these things are the saboteurs that stop us from reaching our full potential. And then about 5 years in, my CPA said to me, have you ever heard of Vistage? And I said, no. And he said, well, you work a day a month on your business versus in your business. I said, you got to be nuts. I don't have a day a month with my family. I'm working from 7:30 in the morning until 10, 11, 12, 1 o'clock at night every single day. And he says, Mark, that's exactly the reason why you should join. So I went to a meeting, and we had a speaker who happened to be a preliminary to EOS, to tie it into EOS here. And he talked about that 96% of all the businesses in the United States never hit more than $1 million in revenue. And I was shocked. I was already doing more than $1 million. And he said, there's predictable barriers to growing your business. And the barrier to go beyond $10 million is the failure of the CEO to hire an executive team. Boom, that's me. I'm doing everything myself. I have no executive team. So I joined Vistage. I hired an executive team. The business grew to become the 58th fastest growing company in the state. I sold it in 2005, moved to New York, and co-founded another company that we eventually raised $20 million and went public. And then when my contract ended, I decided that I wanted to be a Vistage chair because I know how hard it is to run a company. And I wanted to be able to help and give back because of everything that I gained from being a member of Vistage for those 10 years.
Have you seen some of the debates recently on this notion of founder mode? It popped up maybe about 3 weeks ago. And it seems to be a lot of this micromanaging, but there's a lot of promotion of this coming from like the VC world, and like founders in the early days should operate like that. Are you familiar with any? Because we don't have to go down that path, but I would be curious in your take on it, because like I've always been of the mind of, you hire incredible people that are smarter and more brilliant, and you just get everybody focused on a common vision, and you make sure that the people that you bring inside of your organization have the same core values. That way, when decisions and actions and other things are happening inside, you know that you're heading in the right direction, and they're happening within whatever those constraints or guardrails are. This whole notion of founders mode is completely different. It's this idea that like the founders should be micromanaging the business because they're the ones that have the most at risk. They're the ones that are naturally going to care the most. And so their attention to detail will always naturally bring up the attention to detail from everybody else inside of the organization.
I see it as a polarity. And I think the problem is, I think what you're saying is true, but if you don't manage people, and I'm not saying micromanage, so we'd have to define what that is, but what I really love about EOS is that it gives you a weekly meeting, and you have very specific benchmarks or key performance indicators or metrics to decide if somebody's performing or not. If they're not performing, you have to do something about that as the founder or the CEO. And, are they aligned with your values? Do they get it? Do they have the capacity to do it? Is it that they need coaching, or maybe they're just not the right person in the right seat for the job? I mean, those are the tough decisions that CEOs have to make on a regular basis. So I think it's a both and versus an either or.
That's really interesting. And I used to, so my first chair was Ed Robinson out of Baltimore. My second chair when I moved to Seattle was Tom Leonard. And one of the things they used to always pull me aside and be like, you're abdicating authority. Like you need to make sure you have not necessarily control, but like you're having the right conversations and you're holding people accountable. When you find that someone is maybe a little bit on the further end of the spectrum and it starts to get to like abdicating authority instead of having like the leadership and the management skills, what are some things that you start doing or coaching that individual to?
It's generally an issue that comes up in a group meeting. And for those people that aren't familiar with Vistage, it's a peer group organization where you meet together with 14, 15 other CEOs and similar revenue brackets that you're in. And you come to the meetings and you bring your issues and your challenges and your problems and your opportunities. And the chair, which is my role, facilitates the conversation. So we ask questions and we look for the root cause of the problem, and we help whoever the person with the issue is see their blind spots or maybe get different perspectives or see some experience that's worked for other people in the group or even get confirmation that they're on the right path. So this is an issue that, comes up very frequently. And often what I see is a CEO that finally made that big decision to build their executive team, and they hired a COO or they hired a chief marketing officer or even a chief financial officer, and they hired somebody that had a lot of experience and a beautiful resume. They really felt this person's going to take the load off their shoulders, and then they just lay back and expect this person to perform miracles. And then it's generally like 3 to 6 months later, it's like, I'm paying all this money because they really want to pay all this money for this guy or this person, this woman, and she's not performing. What do I do? And it's really late then because they've abdicated. They haven't been measuring. They haven't been meeting with them weekly. They just trusted that this person was going to fix everything. And it really doesn't work that way. I mean, you go to play for the Yankees, you still have to go to practice. You have to learn how they operate in the Yankees and what that culture is. And you still have coaches and managers there that are looking at your performance and making sure that you're performing according to the standards of the organization. So depending on the timing of when that person brings up that issue, I might see if they can begin meeting on a regular basis. Many times if they are not on EOS, I recommend them to an EOS implementer or a facilitator. They need to put some structure in place to be able to measure the performance, and sometimes it's just too late and they have to let that person go and start all over again.
One of the issues that I've had, in addition to hiring somebody to do the things that like I was already doing, I've had issues hiring folks to do things that I wasn't doing, and it's because I wasn't capable or didn't have that subject matter expertise, and that's why I brought that individual in. And what's been really interesting, and I struggle with this even today, is like generally the folks that I bring into the organization are always more seasoned than me, but generally more seasoned means a little bit older than me, and they've seen much more of life and they have a lot more experience. And there are times that my companies have gone down a path which I questioned, but I didn't have the data. I didn't have the expertise to say like that's not right. I just had a feeling that like this doesn't feel right. But I have somebody in that seat that is a subject matter expertise. And then of course, months or maybe a year later, it's demonstrated or proven that like that was the wrong decision or that was the wrong path. And then I'm kicking myself because I'm like I knew, but I couldn't justify why I knew. It was intuition, experience, whatever the case may be. but this person had 20 years more experience than me in this specific thing. Therefore, like they should have been right. Do you ever stumble across business owners that are having a similar issue, and how do you help guide them?
I mean, all the time. This is I think one of the most challenging parts about being a CEO is that you have some sort of expertise within a specific domain, but maybe you don't have no idea of reading a financial statement, of understanding a financial statement, and you need a CFO, and you hire a CFO and you pay them a lot of money, but you don't know if they're doing a job, a good job, a bad job. You hire a programmer or a marketer or all of these different domains of running your business that you don't have expertise in. You may know your product, you may know how to sell your product, or you may know how to engineer your product. You're hiring a salesperson. So I think that's one of the hardest parts of the job and you look for people that have great resumes. They may be older than you. They look like they know what they're doing. So I think it's really important that you develop metrics that measure their performance, and you look at their performance rather than their resume on a weekly basis. I mean, other things that you can do is people bring it up as an issue in their Vistage group. I mean, if it's somebody that's in the accounting field, you can have your CPA or somebody that you trust that is competent to judge the competence of the person that is doing the job. Or you can have an outside auditor come in if it's a technology company and audit the technology. I mean, you have to figure out ways to verify that the person is competent, because it's a problem. I mean, it's a problem even with your CPAs and your lawyers. I mean, that's one of the things that maybe you experienced in Vistage that I did as a member is, I learned a couple years later that I needed to upgrade my CPA. And I learned when I was selling my business that the lawyer that I had wasn't the lawyer for selling my business and negotiating those contracts. I mean, I upgraded 2 or 3 times in the years that I owned my business.
Yeah, and I like a quick plug for Vistage, if I may. Like Vistage was a game changer for me. So my first business was a business called Run for Your Lives. It was a zombie infested 5K obstacle course race. It was just as crazy as it sounds. It basically everybody donned a flag football belt, and they ran around a 5-kilometer course, and we put 250 zombies to go and chase them and take the flags off the belt. But that grew rapidly. So that went from 0 to about $8 million in 2 years, like 18 months, 2 years, something like that. And it fell off a cliff just as fast. And so it was disastrous. But what I discovered during that journey is like, I didn't have people around me that I could have candid conversations with. I didn't have like my tribe, my community. And it's a lot different going in and talking to your COO or your VP of operations or your CFO or whoever else kind of may be influencing inside of the organization versus having like a peer group of people that are experiencing the similar issues. And like as a testament to that, so I separated from active service in 2017 and continued on in the reserves. But my first thing was go find a tribe. And so I reached out to a whole bunch of people, and someone was like, oh, I'm in this thing called Vistage. And so I did some research, I joined. But the only reason that Hunt to Killer made it past year 2 or year 3 is because I had peers around me that were not only rooting for me, but had that expertise. So everything you just said right there, I agree with you. And like having other people that can challenge you and speak candidly to you is important in that journey.
That's the same thing that I think that my first business failed is I didn't have a group of people around me to question my answers, question my decisions, and to challenge me. And even in the first few years that I was running Taylor Systems Engineering, I didn't have that either. So all the decisions I'm making in a cloud. I mean, I was a member of an industry group, but it was myopic. It wasn't the diversity of perspectives you get from being with a bunch of other business owners who have no other agenda other than to help one another. So, every time I'd go to my engineers and say, should we invest in this technology? They'd say, yeah, that's cool. Spend more money.
Yes. Yeah. Hey, when you look back on your first company, and I do this all the time. I don't know if you do this exercise. When you look back at some of your failures, and let's talk about the first one. Like, do you look back and say, like, there are actually decisions or other things that I could have made that would have changed the ultimate outcome? Or do you look at that and say, like, no, we went into the wrong market and there was no way we were ever going to be able to succeed in that market given the environment that we entered?
I mean, if I look back, my older self at my younger self, I wish I would have done what Jim Collins says, shoot bullets before you shoot cannonballs. I mean, it would have been easy enough to learn the culture of that community from afar without investing in renting an office and promoting yellow page ads and hiring salespeople. I was too much of my ego in like the glory of being a business owner versus a scrappy salesperson that really learned what the market was before, shooting my cannonball.
Are there, when you were going door to door, were there like when you cut your teeth doing that, are there lessons from that you've carried throughout your career? So like we've talked a lot about the business lessons, but I hear this all the time of like some of the most successful people in the world were door to door in the very early days. So there's like something that happens there. There's some magic. Like what is that? What did you discover? What did you learn? What happened as you're going door to door and trying to sell some sort of service or product?
It's really, I think, the premise of positive intelligence, that you have to respond to life's events with a positive rather than a negative mindset. And it's real easy for a salesperson, any salesperson, to feel, oh, I've been rejected. Oh, this doesn't work. Oh, I'm a failure. Oh, I'm no good at this. And all of these conversations that if you dwell in these conversations of fear, anxiety, they're going to bring you down. You're not going to have your full potential. What really helped me succeed was really a luck. I mean, Jim Collins says that's one of the greatest differences between the good to great companies is luck. And the luck that I had was after I was on the job for about 3 weeks, a family that I was talking to that lived in a mobile home told me they couldn't afford to buy the fire protection system. And the wife has got tears running down her eyes because her sister died in a fire when they were young. And she said, I really, really need this to her husband. And so we're sitting there. This is in the 70s. We all smoked and we're smoking cigarettes. And I said, if you guys could reduce your cigarette smoking by just 1 pack a day, you could afford this system because it's only 55 cents a day. And she said, yes, we're doing that. And her husband said, okay. And I got them financing. We put in the fire alarm system. And about 3 weeks later, they had a fire. And it saved her life, her husband's life, and all 3 of their kids. And she wrote a letter to the company saying how grateful she was that I creatively helped them to afford this system because they would have all certainly died in that fire if it hadn't been for me. And the president of the company gave me the Vulcan Lifesaver Award. And I got a button that said, I save lives for a living. And I knew that in my heart. Talk about having a cause or your why or a purpose. I knew that what I said made a difference every single day. So I'd go up to a door and they would say, no, I'm not interested. And I would go to the next one. I'd go to the next one. I'd go to the next one. And, part of me knew that it was a numbers game, that if you went to 10 doors, one person would say yes and agree to let you do a fire safety presentation. And if you did 10 fire safety presentations, half of them would say yes. So I could calculate all that mental, but it was in my heart that I knew that I was there saving people's lives. And I had the experience to know that.
I love it. There was purpose behind it. Like it wasn't, I don't know how the vacuum cleaner sales people felt, but like there's not really much. You have a clean house, yay! Versus you're saving lives, and that's I don't know. It feels like that can really fuel some magic.
And it's true for me today. I mean, I know what a difference that being in a peer group has. I know what a difference that positive intelligence has. So I believe that I'm still saving lives every single day, because I know how stressful it can be to be a CEO, and that stress not only impacts them and their life, that they could die from a heart attack from the stress, but it impacts the employees that work around them and create stress amongst them. So that if I can help elevate the leadership and the mental fitness of CEOs that I'm saving lives and making a difference in their employees and in our community and in our world.
I love it. And now I'm like, oh, we're 30 minutes in and we haven't even talked about positive intelligence. I realize you weaved it in, but let's dive into this because this was fascinating on our first call. And you said it, and I was like, I've never heard of that. Now I've got a brief sheet, I've got webinars, I've got a book that's on the way from Amazon. Let's start from the very scratch. Like, what is positive intelligence?
So positive intelligence is really a platform like EOS for mental fitness. And it was created by a man named Shirzad Chamine. And I don't know if you have show notes, but you could put it in there. But if you go to Amazon and look for positive intelligence, you can find the book. And I actually had the book on my bookshelf for a while. I don't even know how long. But COVID hit. And, I run groups. I had 3 group meetings in March of 2020. And on Friday, the 13th of 2020, I woke up and I was feeling sicker than I felt, and I can't even tell you how long. And it was the next day that the mayor closed down New York and declared it a state of emergency, and the governor closed down the whole state and said we had to stay at home. But I couldn't find a thermometer, and they said they wouldn't let you into the hospital unless you had a temperature of 103 degrees. So I was waking up drenched in sweat. I woke up one day and I had so much pain that I thought my kidney exploded, and so they agreed to see me. And even then, they couldn't even tell you if you had COVID right away. They didn't have the instant test. So a few days later, they said that I had COVID. And I was bedridden for 6 weeks. I had zero energy. I lost my sense of taste and smell, and I was really sick. And I picked up that book and I started reading it. And I thought, wow. And it really impressed me. And so I saw there was a 6-week course. We call it the Positive Intelligence Boot Camp. I now teach those 6 courses now. And I took the 6-week course, and it really helped me to put together a bunch of principles that I'd learned over the years from a lot of these personal development workshops. But EOS doesn't really have anything that's brand new in it, but it's taken great ideas from Lencioni and from Jim Collins and put them into an easy to understand operating system. Positive intelligence takes all of these great ideas from positive psychology, from neuroscience, from sports performance psychology, and package them in a way that's very simple to teach and understand and execute. So that's what a short introduction to positive intelligence, but it's basically your ability to respond to negative events with a positive rather than a negative mindset.
And is this a program, like when you think about it, is it about a shift in mindset and continuing to explore and discover that, when you talked about it being a platform and the comparison to EOS, immediately I start thinking about, oh, there's a framework. There's a community. There's a step-by-step process. How does one both discover, practice, and then master positive intelligence?
Yes, you're right. It has all 3 of those. It comes with an app that comes on your phone. So on the app, you get a practice for every single day. There's a community. So these are different videos that you watch. Once a week, you watch a video that Shirzad does. It's going to teach you some aspect of that framework. And what it's doing is helping you to build a habit, a new habit of mental fitness. So it teaches you, the 3-step process in short is, first, you want to be able to catch your saboteurs. So you want to notice when you're having that conversation that I'm not enough. And the clue that you have is if you're feeling an emotion of frustration, of fear, of anxiety, of stress, of regret, any of those feelings, it's like, oh, there's a saboteur that's at work here. So that's the first step. Catch the saboteur. And when you catch the saboteur, you celebrate. Yes, I caught the saboteur, because now you're releasing dopamine into your body and it's increasing your self-awareness. And you're practicing that all day long. And he gives you a couple of, instructional videos on how to do that. And then we have a community that we meet. In my case, it's Mondays at 4:00, and everyone comes in and we answer questions and support one another and give them more practice to continue to learn it. And then there's a community that you have on your phone as well that you can talk to. So the second step is you want to power up what we call your sage brain. So we've heard about left brain thinking and right brain thinking, and it's a little more complex than that, but it's easier to remember if you think of it that way. And so it's like you have a battle in your brain between these saboteurs and what we call the sage. And the sage is where you have powers like empathy, like curiosity, navigate, where you can navigate to higher principles and powers. There's 5 sage powers that we talk about. And the way that you power up your sage brain is by doing mindfulness type exercises that we call PQ reps. PQ stands for positive intelligence quotient, like IQ is intelligence quotient and EQ is emotional quotient. And just like physical fitness, you have to build up your mental muscles. And as you build these mental muscles, if you're doing this for 15 to 20 minutes a day for 6 weeks, and you did an fMRI of your brain before and after, you would see that you've actually quieted down the saboteur section of your brain, and you've woken up the sage part of your brain. So that's the second step, is to power up your brain. Now, PQ rep, we could do one together if you want.
Let's do it.
Put your hand on your heart. Take a deep breath. Hold it for a few seconds. And let it go. Take another deep breath. Hold it for a few seconds. Let it go. Now that probably took 10 seconds. And do you notice a difference right now in how you're feeling?
Yeah, it's just like, boo. I mean, I don't know why I just made a noise, but it's like everything just settles.
Yeah, it just kind of settles. So imagine making a decision from this space versus the space we were in just a few seconds ago. Yep. So that's the second step, is you want to power that part of your brain that calms your nervous system down, and they can measure it. That's what's so amazing about this. And then the third step of the process is to use a sage power, and a sage power might be empathize. So empathize might be, do you have kids?
Yes, 4.
4. And what are their ages?
That's always a trick question, but thankfully I've had this question recently, so I'm not going to look dumb on going on live stream. We have 19, 15, 12, and 10. Okay, let's take like the 10-year-old. Yeah, my granddaughter is 10. Is it a boy or a girl? The 10-year-old is a girl.
A girl. So let's say she comes home and they played soccer, or maybe you're at a game watching her play soccer, and you see your neighbor go up to her after she's missed like several different balls and start yelling at her. What's wrong with you? You're a loser. You should never be in this game. What would you do?
Go knock him out.
Exactly.
Probably yell at him. Yeah.
Exactly. But how many of those conversations do we have about ourselves when we make a mistake? So the empathize power is after you've done a couple of PQ reps, whether it's putting your hand on your heart and breathing or rubbing your fingers together, or there's 50 different ones that you can do to settle yourself down. Empathize. Think of yourself, or think of your 10-year-old daughter, and imagine, would I be saying these things that I'm saying to myself to my 10-year-old daughter? Yep. And just get in touch with how you would be kinder to your child than you are to yourself. Now, I keep a picture of my granddaughter on my desk.
Love it.
This is a reminder that, if I catch myself in that saboteur, I think, oh, what would I say to her, who I love so much? I would be so much, I would say, you know, we make mistakes as human beings. It's okay. You can learn. These are the kinds of conversations you want to have with yourself that's going to empower that sage power, that's going to have you reach more of your full potential.
And one of the things with PQ is, I'm looking at the sheet that you sent as well, which I absolutely love, is that there's this notion of like optimizing positive intelligence can have significant impacts on business operating systems inside of the organization. So, like, what does that mean? Like, let's start with vision, for instance. Like, is this a before you do the vision exercise, we do some quick breathing and we rub our fingers together? Is this like we get everybody on the same page? What does that mean?
Well, let's go back a step. Have you heard the expression that the leader brings the weather?
Yes. Yeah.
So, if you're in a bad mood and you're the leader, everybody in the company knows about it. So you have to really take care of yourself as the leader first. We bring teams, generally goes the leader first does it, and then teams through the entire 6-week boot camp so that they begin to learn these techniques. So you're not just saying, okay, everybody, I want you to put your hand on your heart and breathe 3 times. So they know what each other's saboteurs are. So imagine if you had a team that there was so much safety that you knew each other's saboteurs and you could call them out on it. You could call a sage break. Say, okay, I think we're getting emotional here. I think we're getting stressed here. Let's take 2 minutes and do some sage exercises. And then you go into that mode. Then you can work on creating your vision. I've been in I don't know how many vision creating exercises with teams, and people can get upset during a vision setting exercise. Have you seen that?
No, that's usually the most fun part. Like we haven't even gotten to the issues yet.
I think this is what my vision should be. No, you're wrong. This is what my vision should be. And they're arguing about it, and people are getting elevated and upset, and it doesn't become productive after a period of time. So you call a sage break. People relax. We have another exercise, which is to consult your older, wiser self. So maybe you close your eyes. We call it the navigate sage power. Think of yourself 10 years from now or 20 years from now. What would your older, wiser self say is important in this situation? What's not important in this situation? What would that person advise you to do in this situation? And then you come back and you listen to what that advice might be. And I believe that it's inside all of us, but we're coming from a different place. And the other thing about the weather that's different with human beings is that it's contagious. You ever notice if one of your kids is in a bad mood, the other kids get into a bad mood?
Yes.
Yes. Yeah. And the opposite is true.
I saw a video last week, and it was a scientific study, but basically they sent a guy, I think it was in the UK, they sent a gentleman to a bus stop just to start uncontrollably laughing. And that's all that this individual did, like a full bus stop, 25 people around, and just looks completely goofy, just sitting there laughing. And then all of a sudden, like 10 seconds in, like someone started laughing next to him, and then someone started laughing next to that. And like by the time they got done, it was like a minute in, the whole train stop is laughing. Yes. It was fascinating.
Yes, because it's contagious both ways. Either the bad mood is contagious and brings everybody down and frustrated and stressed and angry, which has a physical impact on our health, or the sage is contagious and that person spread that contagion of happiness. And imagine making decisions from both of those two different places.
When you talked a little bit earlier about this idea of like the team understands each other's saboteurs, and like I understand being able to read a room and understanding like when the tension's starting to rise, and like maybe it's time for a break, maybe it's not time for a break, depending upon like where we're going to take this conversation. But I thought it was really interesting when you talked about like understanding each other's saboteur, and how do you do that? So like if you were talking to an executive team, or maybe you're just talking to a CEO and you're like, listen, like we need to be able to identify this and like have this deeper understanding where we can create this vulnerable environment. Are these exercises that the team needs to do in advance to understand the triggers and different things, or I don't know, like how do you do, it sounds great. How do you actually do that?
Well, it's very easy. You can have everybody go to positiveintelligence.com and do the saboteur assessment. It's free. So, you've probably done the DISC assessment or the Myers-Briggs assessment or the different assessments for your team in the past. It's just doing the same. So you discover, did you do it?
I know, but I am now. As soon as we hang up, I'm doing it today, and then I'm going to send it to you for some critique.
Okay. Right. So I have my top three. My number one is I have a stickler saboteur. The stickler saboteur wants everything to be done perfectly. It's like a perfectionist. The number two is I have a pleaser saboteur. I want people to like me. I want to please them. And then the third one is a hyperachiever saboteur, where I'm focused on achieving whatever the goals are. Now, all three of those are saboteurs that can get in my way. If I'm working on a PowerPoint presentation, probably somebody's not going to notice if the type is different from one slide to the next, if I use an Arial font versus a Times Roman font. And if I'm spending hours and hours and not getting enough sleep, making sure that it's absolutely perfect before a presentation the next day, I'm not doing myself a service. Or when it impacts other people, if I'm holding other people to this high of a standard, imagine working for me. Mm-hmm. It would be bad. My pleaser saboteur is I might not have conversations that are the difficult conversations because I want you to like me. If you're working for me and I'm trying to please you all the time, you could start to take advantage of me. Yep. And I could become resentful that I'm so busy trying to please everyone around me and I'm not doing anything to take care of myself. And then that resentment gets in the way. And the hyperachiever saboteur is probably the most challenging one because most of the people listening to this podcast and most of the leaders that I work with have the hyperachiever saboteur. They think that's what actually pushes them to success. But, if you're a basketball player and you're so worried about getting the basket, what happens? You choke, right?
Yep.
The hyperachiever saboteur, I say to people, is pain good for you? What do you think, Ryan?
Maybe at times.
Pain is good for you. If you put your hand on a hot stove, do you want to feel pain?
Yeah, because then our hand would burn off.
Exactly. So how long do you want to feel it for?
Not very long.
Exactly, not very long. And the same thing is true with these saboteurs. You catch the saboteur, what gets us dysfunctional is dwelling with the same conversation going over and over in our head. Oh, I'm not good enough. Oh, I failed. Oh, and staying in that. It's just like leaving our hand on the stove versus catching that saboteur saying, oh, there you go again. Yay, I see you here again. And now I can have some choice about it, and I can take some deep breaths. Our moms told us to take 10 deep breaths. I can go for a walk in the woods. I can just rub my fingers together and feel the ridges of my fingers for 10 seconds. I can do this right when we're on a Zoom call and you don't even know that. I can wiggle my toes and I can feel my feet flat on the ground. I'm getting out of my head and into my body. I don't know if you ever listened to the Huberman podcast, the guy from Stanford.
Oh, yes. Yeah. Actually, I just watched one of his on alcohol, like maybe 3 weeks ago. Yep.
Yeah. So, he's a neuroscientist, and he says that you cannot get out of your mental thinking by thinking about it. You have to move into your body. You have to do a body sensation. And that's what's going to break that pattern of thinking in those circles that are sabotaging you from your full potential.
Just getting our focus or attention off of whatever that thing is.
Yes.
When when you think about this in a business setting, it's interesting because talk about vision, talk about issues, process, these different things, and it sounds like it's the approach. Like how are you coming to the table? And the saboteurs, like you're catching kind of on the fly, but when you come to the table, if you've ran some exercises, you're in a different state. What are some other things that, because it seems like this helps more than just business. What are some other kind of effects of this in life?
Yeah, this is an operating system that works in our personal lives, works as a parent. I mean, parenting, I think, is one of the biggest challenges there is. How do you not get triggered when your child has done something that you don't approve of? But does it do any good to yell at your child and to escalate the conversation? And yours are into the teenage years, and I remember those years well. I mean, it just escalates and escalates and escalates, and sometimes it can get really, really bad.
Yep.
This is coming at it, another one of the sage powers we call is activate. So you think of a Jedi warrior or, a martial artist. You don't want to fight out of anger or fear. You want to fight with a calm, clear-headed focus. And that's what sage stuff is.
Do you like when you have your Vistage groups or your cohorts together, do you do a lot of this inside of the groups, and do you notice a difference, or do you try to get folks to jump all in on this? Like what do your groups look like?
So going back to COVID, after that 6-week course that I did, they offered a 1-year certification program, which was really a lot of work. It was several hours a week worth of work and practice. And it took me a year, and I think it was in April of 2021, I became the first positive intelligence certified coach out of all the Vistage chairs.
Nice.
I thought this was so helpful that I offered the $1,000 program to all my Vistage members for free. And so many of them took it. I don't know if 100% took it, but I would say 80% took the program over the course of the next year or so. So now that they all know it, it's part of our culture. So you remember in Vistage when you had an issue to process?
Yes.
How you would feel when you were processing an issue? Did you ever feel like you were in the hot seat?
Every time my anxiety's up. It depends on, and it depends on how I was already feeling that day. But yes, definitely the hot seat.
So what if I told you to take 3 deep breaths before we process your issue, just to calm you down a little bit? And then before people started making suggestions, the same thing. We have another sage power. We call it the yes and power. It's the power of innovation. And again, these are powers that are on the right side of the brain. We talked about navigate, activate. We talked about empathize. So in the Vistage process, people make a suggestion after we've asked a lot of questions, and they're coming up with ideas on things that you could do. And I remember as a Vistage member myself that people would say things, I said, oh, that's not going to work in my head. Oh, that's not going to work. Oh, they don't know what they're talking about. You know what I mean? So the navigate, or the yes and power, the innovate power, is every time somebody makes a suggestion, you have to say, what I like about that is. So you're looking for something you like about that suggestion, and somehow it changes the neural pathways. So you have to look for at least 10% of that idea that you like, instead of just automatically shutting it down. And then if you're really doing it, you go, and I could do this, and you come up with another idea. So you can empower a whole group to do yes and on these ideas, just so that you're more open and receptive to different ideas.
That is so interesting. What I like about this, and I was trying to think of like other ways that this is used, because like when I hear you talking about not just the breathing, but now the techniques of like the yes and what I like about this is like now we're getting into like active listening, almost like different types of ways to listen and then respond. And so as you're walking through this whole system, like what's going through my head is, it's not just morning breathing, it's not just rubbing your fingers, it's not just yes and, it's a full suite of tools that we can use to have better connections, better communication, better mental health. Like it sounds like a really impressive system.
It is. It's very impressive. And the results that they've done, they've had over 1 million people do this assessment already. And the results are just amazing. You can look on the website, but sales teams that sell 37% more. Because in sales, I can't think of another domain where the saboteurs are so loud to keep you from making that next call. I mean, people don't knock on doors anymore. You couldn't even do it in New York with all the security systems, but even picking up the phone and calling people.
Yep.
Afraid to do that.
Yeah. Well, what are your goals? Hey, what are your goals, Mark? We've talked a lot about history. We've brought us to the present, and you're doing some amazing things with not only positive intelligence, but the Vistage groups, which I absolutely admire. That had a huge impact in my life. Like, where are you taking all of this? Where do you want to go? Is this your passion, and this is it? There is no retirement?
Oh, this is my passion, and as long as I'm physically and mentally healthy, this is what I want to do. I want to continue to make a contribution to people's lives, and I want to remain. I mean, my wife says if I ever retired, I would probably drive her crazy, and I think I would drive myself crazy, even on days when I don't have things to do. If I'm not playing with my grandchildren, which is a joy of mine. But just sitting around the house, I have to really get into a space to read for a couple hours. I love what I do. I love helping people. I love connecting with my members. I love hearing their situations. I love teaching this positive intelligence course. So to keep my groups full are my goals, and to continue to make a difference and to be physically and mentally healthy.
I love it. And usually, because this is the first time, I think I talked about this earlier, this is the first time that I've had a Vistage chair on. And so I have like this very standard last question, which is always, what are you looking for? What are you looking for in clients? And, is there an area of focus? With you, like, one, you've got Vistage, and two, you've got this positive intelligence program. And so if someone just listened to all this and they're like, I want to do that. Like, I want to figure out positive intelligence. I want to be a part of this program. How would they get a hold of you, Mark?
Well, you could email me, mark@marktaylor.nyc. You can go to my website, marktaylor.nyc. You could look me up on LinkedIn and direct message me. I'm Mark Taylor. If you put in Mark Taylor and Vistage, I'm sure that I'll pop up. I'm starting a new cohort, and it'll last for the next, starting on October 28th, and it'll go for 6 weeks for positive intelligence. I've got about 15 people already enrolled in it, but I have room for 10 more that you could enroll and learn the positive intelligence. And if you're a CEO in New York City or willing to drive to New York City, I'm looking for CEOs that have companies with revenues over 10 million and probably less than 250 million, that have an executive team so they can take a day out a month to work on their business versus in their business. And if they're passionate learners and want to learn to become a better CEO, our members on average do 2.2 times the revenue of their competitors. So that's what I'm looking for.
Love it. And I can speak to the power of Vistage. Maybe one day I'll be able to speak to the power of positive intelligence. I'm going to do some more research, especially when the book comes. But Mark, thank you so much for coming on. I realize it's a Friday, and for you it's much later. And so, like, for you taking the time, 60 minutes out of your Friday to come and just talk to us all about positive intelligence, I just wanted to thank you for the time.
You're welcome. Thank you, Ryan.
Awesome.